Good morning. Hello, everybody. I hope you are having an okay time this morning. I hope you're all still dealing well with the COVID situation. I hope your loved ones are safe and healthy. Um, and if they aren't, I send you my heart, my love, and I hope that you are okay and that you are surviving and handling all of this well. I send you all my blessings. Welcome to my channel. Today, we're doing another reading. So, if you've been watching for a while, then you've read or heard me read through the first part of my book, Lullaby of the Lilitu, this novel right here. And we are starting the second part today. So, it is a book in parts, and there are chapters within the parts, as you may have noticed. And as I've said before, just in case you're new, this is not the official audiobook. This is just something I feel like doing because honestly, it's one of the only things I have to offer during this time is my story, my writing. Oh, good morning, Binary. Hello. So yeah, my writing is one of the few things I have to offer, and at this time, I wanted to offer something to help people. And I know for me, one of my biggest saviors, I guess, besides music, is books, stories, stories in all kinds of media. So that includes like movies and TV shows, just short stories, word of mouth stories, They have saved my life time and time again. And I'm hoping that this can be a soothing experience for someone out there, anyone. And I'm usually here at night or like very early in the morning, like 3 a.m. But I've been falling asleep earlier in the night lately, so I figured I would just go ahead and do this, even though it's morning and many of my fellow vampires may miss it when they wake up at an appropriate, normal nighttime hour. Then they will be able to hear this as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started reading Lullaby of the Lilitu. This is my hard copy. I'm reading the paperback version, and you can get either version on my website, thewilderathome.com, or you can get just the paperback version on Amazon. You can also get the ebook anywhere you buy books, and you can ask your libraries to order you a copy of the physical or ebook. Okay? So let's go ahead. We're starting Part 2, Chapter 1. June 19th, 2034, 1. Beneath the town of Biggin Hill, Dr. Abraham Seward darted frantically across his sterile basement laboratory. A large display flashed on the wall, the numbers fluctuating as a hidden creature moaned in a sealed cell. A centrifuge buzzed and slowed to a stop. Dr. Seward emptied the small test tube into a nearby glass, which was half filled with green liquid. After a quick mix, he jogged up the stairs, leaving the moaning creature behind. A young man of only 37, the doctor's once rich brown hair had silvered in a short time. 2 months ago, his wife fell ill following the loss of their unborn child, the result of a miracle pregnancy lasting only 6 months. She'd wasted away and slipped into madness. Her physicians deemed the affliction psychological, but Abraham knew better. Something else made her sick, and he was determined to find out what. News droned from an old television in the kitchen. 3 more people have succumbed to the new virus doctors are dubbing LV. Abraham passed through his living room, kicking aside a pile of clothes he'd left on the floor. Cheer and color once filled this house that now sat still and dark. The fatal disease that receded in the winter is back with a vengeance in Biggin Hill. Authorities are urging citizens to stay indoors. The newscaster glanced at the cards in her hands and tapped them against the Channel 9 desk. Abraham shuffled past the table in the center of the room. Stacks of paper and dirt and dirty dishes littered its surface. "I'm Kate Beck." Abraham clicked the knob, silencing the broadcast. His shoulders slumped as he spooned sugar into the concoction. "I'm sorry, Camille," he sighed, remembering the months that led to this. He and his colleagues had investigated LV in its early stages. It appeared in the dead of winter, first affecting a man named Carl Lewis, the virus's namesake. Lewis survived, but Abraham's lab discovered he was the exception. Most who contracted LV didn't live to see the week's end. The virus mutated and sent its victims into a violent rage. They disappeared into the night, only to be found the next morning, their gangrenous bodies littering alleys and parks. Abraham worked day and night in his lab at Bromley College. He hired a nurse to stay with his wife in her second trimester, but ran into difficulty when he crossed the university's ethical boundaries and tested his medicinal concoctions on humans who had contracted the virus. They banned him from the campus and had him stripped of his license. A small clock on the kitchen table beeped. 9 o'clock flashed on the bright red display, and Abraham shook his head, anticipating what was to come. A soft moan floated from the basement, bringing the hairs on his arms to a stand. He sighed and turned towards the stairs. 2 rooms faced one another at the top. Abraham turned left into his own bedroom. The flowered curtains were drawn, as they had been since she returned from the hospital. Camille Seward sat at the edge of their bed. She stared at the wall, singing, her voice a whisper. Her hand sat limp in her lap. She didn't notice Abraham come in with a glass. She didn't react when he said, "How are you, dear?" She didn't stop singing when he said, "I've brought a new medicine for you. This time I used St. John's wort with dandelion root and the distilled essence of cot." She continued singing as he placed the glass to her lips and urged her to drink it. He took a seat in the old chair he placed by the bed. For half an hour, he held the glass to her lips, only stopping to rest his arms. With no success, he dropped his head and placed the glass on the bedside table. He sat across from her, gazing into her eyes, trying to see if any of his wife remained. Once a brilliant biologist, Camille now spent her days behind vacant eyes, humming or singing with no regard for others in the room. She never spoke, and until 2 days ago, Abraham had found no luck convincing her to drink his home-brewed medicine. He closed his eyes, remembering simpler days. Days when he, a TA for Bromley's microbiology department, and Camille, a senior at the top of her class, felt the world to be good and pure. Days long gone. As he sat staring at his wife, an angry growl rumbled from the basement. His other patient was waking up. Camille heard it too. She tilted her head to listen and stopped singing. Her eyes darted to the door and her hands went to her stomach as she began to cry. Dr. Seward held his wife as she sobbed. The patient bellowed from the basement, its moans echoing Camille's. When she slumped against him, her energy spent, Abraham picked up the mixture, and she drank without protest. He laid her down, knowing she would soon sleep. She resumed humming her song as he left the room, locking the door behind him. For 3 nights, this scene had played out in much the same way. The being in his lab woke, Camille wept for a child that would never be, and then she slept. It was the same each night since he'd brought the thing home. There had to be a connection. This was not the first time Abraham brought a patient home. Before the miscarriage, Camille paid no attention to these people. Now, this new patient was the only thing that seemed to wake her at all. After a meager dinner of biryani and a quick wash, he descended into the basement. The creature, more beast than human, roared and growled from its place of captivity. Abraham had kept it locked in the steel cell for the past 3 days. He opened a small window in the steel door and peeked in at the thrashing patient. The subject threw himself from wall to wall, emitting wild, guttural screams. After a few moments, he looked to Abraham at the window and lunged, grabbing the short bars with bloody hands. The skin had begun to peel, and broken nails studded the cell's dirt walls. Abraham recoiled in disgust as the man clawed and bellowed. He marveled at the thought of someone remaining alive this far into the disease, and grabbed a rifle loaded with tranquilizer darts, aiming it at the raging patient. He shot twice and waited. The subject raged for another half-hour before dropping to the ground. Abraham moved fast to open the door and drag the body out. He pulled it up onto the examination table and secured it with thick steel restraints. The creature displayed great physical power, and he took no chances. Subject LV-14, June 19, 2034. He spoke into an old handheld recording device. Subject displays increased aggression since yesterday. Drop time from injected lazorphine was 5 minutes shorter. He checked the patient's vitals, placing a stethoscope to his chest. He stopped cold, standing straight and staring at the body on his table. After a few moments, he found his voice. The subject's heartbeat, having been faint these past 2 days, seems to have come to a stop at 2100 hours. Perhaps the last dosage of tranquilizer combined with high adrenaline was the cause. I will begin an autopsy immediately. He secured a medical mask to his face, and with a pair of scissors, he cut through the soiled, ripped clothing. His hands trembled. The bruised and graying flesh underneath looked as though it had begun decomposing hours earlier. A slight purple hue tinted the subject's bloody face, and the neck had turned a pale green. How strange. He only just died. The doctor sliced into his patient's shoulder, cutting a Y into the cold, stiff chest. Subject displays advanced putrefaction, he recorded, pulling open the skin to examine the chest cavity. The revolting odor of rotting flesh and sickness penetrated his mask. He sawed into the ribs and noted that the organs inside appeared to have ceased functioning hours earlier. This man could not have been alive past morning, yet only an hour had passed since Abraham put him down. Good Lord, he whispered, removing the soft, decaying organs and placing each in a nearby bowl. He sliced into the stomach for a deeper examination. Blood and acid spilled out onto the table. Abraham's eyes fluttered as he fought back tears at the noxious rising fumes. He picked through the stomach, finding chunks of the meat he had placed in the room along with fragments of LV-14's own teeth. It had slammed itself into the wall so aggressively that they'd gotten knocked down its throat. He moved on to examine the rest of the organs. After an hour of inspection, he cleared his throat. Subject LV-14. Evidence shows that this man died some hours ago, long before I began my examination. In some impossible way, the corpse remained animated, with a still beating heart. The brain began to rot hours ago, but retained activity in certain areas until the moment the creature dropped. This doesn't make sense, he finished before turning off the recorder. It doesn't make sense at all. Abraham hurried towards the stairs, stripping away his bloodied apron and gloves as he moved. He ran up the stairs and into the living room, notebook in hand. Picking up his phone, he headed towards the garage, dialing as he climbed into his old blue Altima. I need to speak with you. It's urgent, he said, the second his recipient answered. Without waiting for a response, Abraham hung up and raced out onto the road. 2. Abraham pulled into the long, winding driveway of Beata Pacis Chapel. The towering church had stood for more than 2 centuries on land that eventually became the Bromley College campus. The chapel was the oldest structure on campus, housing a sole resident, Father Dixon Mayhew. A slight, aging man, Father Mayhew had been the resident priest for 30 years. He stood at the door when Abraham stepped out of the little blue car and bolted past him into the cozy apartment. The old man ambled to a small table where a half-eaten dinner waited. Abraham ignored the scene as he spread his notes out across the rest of the surface while muttering to himself. Father Mayhew took his seat and resumed his meal, waiting for the doctor to finish organizing his notes. This was not the first time he had come bursting into the priest's home with some breakthrough or urgent question. "Abby, you look like hell," the father chuckled when Abraham paused and glared at his work. He waited, watching the young doctor with a sagacious eye, and wondered what new and fascinating evidence he'd found. After a brief silence, Abraham sat down and looked at Father Mayhew. A look of terror the father had never seen lit Abraham's fevered eyes. "Father, I've found something peculiar, and I'm not sure what to make of it," the younger man finally uttered. "I don't think LV is what I thought," he began. "Is what we thought." He told the priest about the patient he left in his basement, then continued. "At first, I believed Camille's condition to be a new mutation of the disease, and I thought that I could fight this newer, longer-lasting version." He paused to make sure the priest understood. "I theorized that Camille, having survived the illness before her pregnancy, had acquired antibodies to the virus. The virus adapted to her stronger body, morphing into a less potent strain, and I thought I could cure the weaker strain. But now I'm not so sure it's a virus at all." Father Mayhew said nothing. He waited for the doctor to continue. Abraham rubbed his chin. "Father, do you remember that old leather book you showed me? One of those Acheron journals?" The old man thought for a moment. "I do recall teachings about the collection in the chapel library, though it's been some time since I've seen the actual journal we had on campus," he said, stroking his bald chin. "I showed you one, you say? I probably shouldn't have. Those books, they're nothing but stories. Why do you ask?" Abraham's voice strained. "I need to see that journal, Father." The priest sat silent for a while. Created by a now defunct religious order, the journals of Acheron detailed thousands of creatures that didn't exist, and untold ancient magics. The Brotherhood of Acheron had written 3 journals, but only one had remained in Bromley. The other 2 disappeared centuries ago. Abraham was reaching for straws, but the father felt for his old friend. "If I show you, will you leave campus before security catches you?" The doctor snorted. "I mean it, Abby." Father Mayhew waved a frail finger. "If they arrest you, who's going to look after Camille?" Abraham leaned across the table and grabbed the father's hands. "Show me the journal, and I'll be out of your hair." The 2 men entered the church and headed towards a door in the back. They descended deep into the basement where a grand old library hid, accessible only to the university head, the father, and those who accompanied them. "Some of the oldest texts in Bromley are here, son. Please be careful." Father Mayhew flicked on the fluorescents. Pale light filled the large, dank room. Bookshelves extended from floor to ceiling across the walls, and shelves lined up across the room. A long table surrounded by chairs split the shelves into 2 sections. Father Mayhew placed a hand on the younger man's shoulder. "Take a seat there. I will find the book." Abraham paced back and forth, running a shaking hand through his graying, disheveled hair. The old man shuffled slowly from book to book, squinting his eyes tight to read each title. His lips moved as he read. The doctor rubbed his hands on his pants and directed a loud groan at the priest. Father Mayhew took his time, walking his fingers across the bindings, ignoring the man's complaint. Abraham walked to the stacks on the other side of the room, searching for anything that looked right. "Ah, here!" Father Mayhew called out, and Abraham ran to the table. The father emerged from the shelves with a square, thin paper booklet. "I don't know what you're hoping to find, Abby." He placed the booklet in front of his friend. "There's nothing but fairy tales in that journal. The church disproved everything in here decades ago. In any case, this old file disk is all I found in our archives. The book isn't here. It's probably been moved to some other library. The university is always changing things around here." Abraham took the file from the old man's hands. His eyes grew wide and he licked his lips. He had seen the book once before, 20 years ago, when the father brought it out to treat the leather. Back then, he'd flipped through it out of curiosity. Now he had a purpose. "You've got to calm down, boy," Father Mayhew lectured. "You're starting to frighten me. How can this have anything to do with your research?" Abraham ran to the library's single computer and inserted the disk. A smudged scan from the journal bleeped onto the screen, and Abraham scrolled through, searching for anything that stood out. After a while, he saw a page scribbled in frantic handwriting. He read aloud. "Year 1825 AD, Isleworth. More bodies have been found in the river. They are bloated and gangrenous, covered in blisters and pustules. Families in neighboring towns have come to claim the bodies. Brother Louis has received reports of people seeing revenants of their dead loved ones, what we have termed wraiths. The wraiths come soon after the moment of death. They rage towards the nearest person and eat them, flesh and all. If they are not taken down, they may escape. That is, until we find them the next day. Their bodies resemble the ones from the river. It has been 2 years since the first sighting in London. Brother Matthew says we are dealing with great evil. Reports have come from as far as the Americas, and..." Abraham slammed his fist on the rickety wooden table holding the computer. "You must let me take this home, Father," Abraham demanded. "You know I can't do that, Abby. It's university property. I can't take it off campus." "So come with me," the doctor said. "Let me show you the creature in my basement. Then you'll understand that something strange is going on." The father glanced at his watch. 4:30 a.m. "I have mass in an hour," he protested. "Please, can't you let another bishop take over for the day?" Abraham's hands trembled as he massaged his temples. Father Mayhew shook his head. "Fine," he said, more worried for his friend's well-being than for the quality of the morning mass. He took the disk and booklet from the fevered man and hid it at the back of the stacks. The two men returned to the father's small chapel house, and Abraham waited in the car while the father dressed and called his replacement. Within the hour, they were on the road. 3. 20 minutes later, the small car pulled into the Seward's garage. The orange-pink light of morning haloed the house's thatched roof as the two men entered. The putrid smell of flesh and dirt sat heavy in the air. The father stopped, pulling a sleeve over his nose. His eyes widened as he stared at his friend. "What have you done, Abby?" he asked. The doctor shrugged, closing the door. Father Mayhew's small frame trembled as he followed his friend towards the basement. A loud thump from upstairs stopped them in their tracks. The man exchanged a questioning look before dashing for the stairs. Abraham called up, "Camille!" No answer. Taking 2 stairs at a time, he bounded towards their bedroom, forgetting the man behind him. He crashed into the room, throwing the door back against the wall. Camille stood in the middle of the room with bewildered eyes, her hands up beside her head. Abraham ran to her and took her hands, checking that nothing was out of place. Something was different. Her hair, usually unkempt and twirling through her fingers, rested on her shoulder, twisted into a thick braid. She stared into the dark corners of the room, her eyes darting from one side to the other. "You scared me." Abraham breathed a sigh of relief and embraced her. "Is everything all right?" the father called from the hall, his breath ragged and choppy. The door slammed shut. Abraham looked around the room where only he and his wife stood. Crossing himself, he pulled her towards the exit, but she pulled back. The old priest pounded at the door, his drumming fist growing more fervent by the second. "We're fine!" Abraham yelled back. The banging stopped. The hair on Abraham's arm stiffened as a freezing breeze blew past his face and its breath clouded in front of him. He pulled Camille towards the door, but she fought, planting her feet into the bedroom carpet. Only her eyes moved. They shone in the early morning light, streaming through the curtains, darting in dizzy circles around the room. Abraham tried to follow her gaze. Nothing moved in the feeble light. The father's knocking thundered against the door again. "Abby!" "I'm sorry, father. We'll be out in a moment. Everything is fine." The man outside grunted his disapproval. "Something isn't right here, son. Hurry." Seward turned towards his motionless wife. "Please, come with me, love. I don't think we're safe here." Camilla's eyes stopped their rapid dance to stare right into Abraham's. She looked at him and through him, straight to the door. She didn't see her husband. She didn't even know he was there. She could only hear the songs in her head as she watched twin shadows making their way around the room, teasing her. They landed in front of the door and smiled at her. She smiled back. Startled by her sudden expression, Abraham turned towards the door. Two tall, slender figures stood before it, wavering between ethereal and corporeal. Cold sweat dripped from his forehead. The silvery voice of an echoing bell sang out. "Sit." Camille moved to the bed and Abraham followed, unable to resist. In an instant, the figures stood inches from the couple. The rising sun illuminated two pale, identical faces. Silver blue veins spread under their death-white flesh in an endless, intricate network. The silver-tongued twin placed her hand on her chest. "I am Eileen. She is Grania, my sister." The sister smiled, a ghoulish sneer twisting her features. Abraham shivered and pulled his wife closer. He eyed the intruders, silently praying for a miracle. "What do you want with us, demon?" The creatures laughed as a sadistic flash crossed Grania's eyes. They spoke in turns, and Abraham's head swam at the sound of their voices. Eileen drifted down into the bedside chair. "I know why." "We know why." Grania's whispering, crackling voice contrasted against her sibling's musical turn. "She's sick," Eileen finished. "We know who." "We can help you."
"We know where."
"We've been watching him."
"When you're ready."
"Just tell her." Camille's eyes snapped to Eileen's face. She sobbed, her tears dripping onto Abraham's arm around her torso. She moaned and rocked back and forth, all while keeping her eyes glued onto Eileen, who held a hand out towards her. The sick woman broke free of her husband's grip, desperately grabbing the hand and falling to her knees. Abraham moved to pick her up, but his legs pressed into the mattress, bound by unseen restraints. "Why can't I move?" He watched his wife, helpless to stop her. She knelt, sobbing into Eileen's hand. Her shoulders shook in violent spasms as she kissed the bone-white fingers. Eileen placed a sharp thumbnail onto her palm, above Camille's head, and sliced across. Thick, dark blood oozed from the cut and crawled down Eileen's pale flesh, pooling around the woman's lips. The doctor recoiled. The ooze released a deep, rotting odor. His stomach turned and he gagged, unable to tear his eyes away as his wife continued to kiss the bloody hand, lapping at the discharge. He turned away, inhaling, when he came face to face with Grania. She grinned, revealing long, pointed teeth. "We're here to help." She cackled as the shaken man fell back onto the bed, unconscious. Abraham sputtered as water splashed into his mouth and nose. He opened his eyes. The sun had completed its climb high into the sky. Father Mayhew stood over him, calling his name and tapping his face. Camille slept on the bed behind him, her mouth and gown stained black, a small smile twisting the corners of her lips. Abraham coughed, a harsh and gurgling sound, and bent over the side of the bed to release the meager contents of his broiling stomach. "What on earth happened here, Abby?" The father placed a hand on his friend's back and handed him a handkerchief. The doctor's eyes quivered as he looked up at the old priest. How could he explain what happened when he didn't understand it himself? He looked down at the mess by their feet, at the droplets of blood still drying in front of the chair, the trail around the bed showing his wife's movements after he'd passed out. What had those monsters done to her? "You've got to show me more of that scan. I need to find that journal, Dixon." Father Mayhew's mouth opened and closed, taken aback by the gravity of Abraham's tone and the familiar use of his name, but he kept quiet. The scent of death, vomit, and other waste hung thick in the air. "Something strange indeed. I'll wait downstairs while you get cleaned up." The cleric nodded, patting Abraham's back, and left the room. Abraham packed a couple of bags and carried Camille down to the living room. The two men peeked in on the body in the basement. It rested on the table where Seward had left it, putrid and rotting. They placed the sleeping woman in the back seat of the car and headed back to Bromley. "Oh, hello, Champagne Sea. Is this about Lilith?" "Not quite. So the name Lilitu does essentially kind of mean the children of Lilith, or the it's another word for demon, or unholy being, or in this book it's a word for godlike creatures that are also terrifying, and the word is Sumerian, and the person who coined it in the book is a Sumerian individual, so that's why they're called Lilitu. But yes, it does come from Lilith. Should I keep going? I've made it to chapter 4. What time is it? It is now noon. You know, I'm going to keep going because this is a short part. So, chapter 4. Abraham parked a few blocks from campus to avoid being seen. He carried Camille under a blanket and kept his head down as they hustled into the priest's apartment. Father Mayhew led Abraham to his bedroom, where they tucked Camille into the twin-sized bed before retreating to the cramped living room that also served as a kitchen. Abraham paced the sparse room. Wow, 70 years with the church, 30 as Beata Patches' resident priest, and this is all they give you to live in, Father. What I lack in material wealth cannot compare to the spiritual bounty that awaits me, my boy. The old man gestured to a pot on the small stove. Help yourself to some tea. Settle your nerves while I get the file from the library. Abraham nodded and sat at the table, looking nowhere in particular as the door closed behind the father. He stared at the papers, still littering the table, and at the dark stains he couldn't wash off his hands. After months of work, he sat closer than ever to an answer. The two unexpected visitors raised more questions than answers, but something good had come of this. Something had changed. "Abe?" Camille emerged from the bedroom doorway. She stumbled towards Abraham, reaching forward, and he leapt up to catch her before she fell. "My baby! They have my baby!" She mumbled the lines over and over as Abraham helped her to sit at the table. For just one moment her eyes appeared lucid. But as Abraham watched, they faded once more into the glazed stupor he had become accustomed to. "Camille," he said, careful to keep his tone even. Her words shocked him. They echoed what she'd said in the hospital after losing the baby, the last words she'd spoken to him before tonight. He peered into her eyes, searching for their old light. "Camille, please come back to me. What can I do to help you? Please talk to me. I would give my soul to have you back." The doors and windows banged open as a cold wind gusted through the room, scattering paper across the kitchen floor and counters. Dual shadows danced through the air before landing a few feet from Abraham and Camille. The twin creatures grinned, still wearing their filthy, blood-stained gowns. Abraham leapt to his feet to guard his wife. "What did you do to her?" He balled his fists, ready for a fight. "I know what you are," he whispered, remembering something he'd seen in the journal years ago. "They who walk the earth as false gods among men, children of the one they called Kai, the dead who would not die." Eileen laughed and clapped her hands, her voice tinkling like falling glass on a steel floor. She grinned. "We are not his children." She looked to Camille. "My blood woke her, temporarily," her sister cut in. "But we did not silence her. We cannot save her."
"Without you,"
Grania finished. Abraham trembled between Camille and the two creatures. "If you didn't do this to her, who did?" Eileen smiled and held her hand out towards Camille. "Let her tell you." Abraham turned to Camille, standing behind him. The fog cleared from her eyes. "Abe." She smiled as tears poured down her cheeks. Then she embraced her husband. Abraham froze in shock for just a moment before wrapping Camille tight in his arms. He pelted her face with kisses as she spoke. "Abe, our baby." Abraham shook his head and squeezed Camille. "I'm sorry, my darling. The baby is gone. The doctors did all they could." "No!" Camille shoved Abraham away, shaking her head violently from side to side. "No! She took it. He made her take it." She screamed and slammed her arms onto the little wooden table. Abraham dashed to her side. "Please, darling, you'll hurt yourself. Let me help you." He lowered her back down into the chair. The outburst had exhausted her, it was clear, and she rocked back and forth, singing in a low tone. "Condamné le sommeil, le monde est comme dans ce réveil, les rideaux se ferment, le soleil meurt pour les dieux, comme le frère pour sa sœur." French. Abraham squeezed his wife's hand and glared at Eileen and Grania. "She doesn't know French. Will you tell me what's going on? What does she mean? Who took our child?" This time, Grania held her hand out to Abraham.
"Come with us. Our master will tell you everything. We can save them both,"
she rasped. Sorry. Abraham laughed at his wife and tucked a dark strand of hair behind her ear. Nothing about this situation seemed logical, but his work over the last 6 months had yielded no results. Now he knew that LV wasn't a virus at all. He whispered to himself, "Am I so desperate as to traverse to parts unknown with demons? They must be demons, and if they are, surely I'll forfeit my soul if I take their offer." Camille's singing petered into a low, mournful hum. Abraham steeled himself and shut his eyes. He pulled Camille into his arm and grabbed Grania's hand with his other. "Okay," he said, swallowing around the knot that had grown at the base of his tongue. "I'll do whatever it takes." Okay, that is the end of part 2. We will start again soon with part 3. Maybe tomorrow, if I wake up early and decide to do a morning thing. We'll do that. Let me know what you guys think, if you want more of this, if you're enjoying this, and if you'd like me to read something after this. It doesn't have to be my own book. I could read someone else's, as long as, that's legal, as long as I'm not, violating any copyright laws. Um, maybe I'll read The Three Musketeers after this. It's been quite a few many years since I've read that book, and I don't know, I feel like reading it again. So maybe that'll be it. Maybe not. Maybe I'll read something else that I'm legally allowed to read. Whatever's Trevor, clever. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this reading. I hope you're all having the best day you could have. I hope you're doing something good for yourself and good for your loved ones, good for the people around you. And I hope you're remembering to try to live in love and care and healing and openness and all those beautiful, wonderful things. And please always remember that I love you. I hope you're well. And I'll see you later. I'll see you later today for a write in. But until then, take care. Have a beautiful day. Bye.